Jarren Duran has been an absolute stud for this Boston Red Sox team this year, but where do the other position players rank? Join me on today's Locked On Red Sox for the position player end of season power rankings.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is all completely free. So you might as well check it out because Locked On is your team every single day. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Happy Friday. Welcome to Locked On Red Sox. Congratulations on making it to the end of what to me was a very fast week. I hope you had a good week yourself. The last week of the regular season for baseball. Only a couple regular season games left for this Red Sox team. So definitely cherish it and take it all in and enjoy it, because as frustrating as they've been this year, I'm sure we all will miss them come the next couple days when we realize we don't get Red Sox baseball on our TV every day anymore. It's always a bittersweet feeling at the end of the season. But today, I wanted to take the time to go through my end of season position player power rankings. So essentially what I do here is I rank the players in order based on how well they performed this year. And I'll be going into how I feel about their future with this Boston Red Sox team. And I tried to keep in mind, injuries happened and not everybody was out there super consistently, but I was trying to think of based on the guys who consistently played a lot of time with this Red Sox team. So I didn't include Mickey Gasper or Nick Sogard, guys who were called up recently, and then Gasper obviously was sent back down to AAA and then called back up. So guys who haven't really played much until the last couple months or so were not incorporated in these rankings, but it's definitely a matter of who is worth keeping, who's worth weeding out, and who are the unsure guys that are kind of in the middle. So when it comes to the position players, I mean, there was definitely a load of talent on this team. Some guys just being more reliable than others. And when you think about the positions that these guys played and the reliability of them, you have to also think about what they did to contribute to the team overall as a whole. So starting with the outfield, you have players like O'Neill and Duran and Rafaela and Abreu out there, and Rep Snyder when he was subbed in there. So this position group was tough because they all contributed a lot to this team this year. Like, they all were reliable as much as they could be. I mean, O'Neill did produce a lot of strikeouts, as did Rafaela, but O'Neill would crush baseballs and provided some much needed power for this Red Sox lineup. And then you had Jarren Duran, who just really did it all this year. And you had Rafaela, Ref Snyder, and Abreu. So if I have to rank the outfielders just within their own position group and how they contributed, thinking overall to everything that these guys contributed to this team, I actually have to right now put Rafaela at the bottom. And I say that just because he's a rookie, and obviously some of these things can be fixed, but the lack of plate discipline we saw from him this year was really tough to watch. Yes, he's miraculous defensively, but the lack of offensive productivity that we would see from him for lots of big stretches was tough to watch. And I'm not saying at all that Rafaela is bad or that the Red Sox shouldn't hang on to him, because again, they extended him. So unless they pull off a trade with a team that is willing to take on his contract, he's kind of here to stay. So I'm not necessarily saying that's the case, but what I am saying is that there were certain things about his game that definitely still need work that I feel like were a level below where everybody else in the outfield was at. So then right above him, I'm putting Tyler O'Neill, because O'Neill defensively struggled. And keep in mind, this guy won a gold glove as a right fielder. That was his main position. And it's not as easy as people might think to just transition over to left field. So he made that transition to left field, and it wasn't the easiest transition, and he did struggle defensively. So yes, he provided power to the lineup at the plate and a good balance with him being a right-handed hitter, but he did strike out a lot, and also his defense wasn't the greatest, so I kind of have to put him right above Rafaela. Then in the middle, a guy who overall was pretty reliable was Refsnyder. And from an offensive standpoint, his numbers were great, even against both righties and lefties, because a lot of times he was brought into games in the past when there was a lefty pitching, because he was somebody who always hit well against lefties, but his numbers against righties increased this year too. So he was able to contribute no matter what in both regards. So that was really impressive, but he was a liability defensively, made some tough plays out there, and had times where I was sitting there saying, Refsnyder should not be out there playing defense in the Red Sox outfield. So that's why he got lowered a little bit in terms of where his ranking was, because he had a place where he was struggling to make the right plays that he needed to make. And that place that he was in was just serious struggle mode of not being able to figure it out. So that definitely decreases productivity for me a little bit. So then we have Wilyer Abreu right above Refsnyder. Now, Abreu did a lot. I mean, was a heck of a defender in the outfield, made a huge impact offensively, and overall showed that he was a capable and really good baseball player. And the only reason I have him below Duran is because obviously Duran's more versatile, and I'm going to get more into that in a minute. But Abreu was somebody who was consistent all season long, and I felt like going into this year, we weren't sure exactly what we were going to get from him because, small sample size and not really knowing if the player we saw in September of last year was just somebody who was amped up by getting called up and that was reflected in his performance, or if that actually was the player that he is. So I had to wait to feel that out and see, but he proved going into this season that he was that player who could consistently hit well and be an offensive contributor. And then obviously his defense was really good. So I have to put him above Refsnyder from the standpoint of the fact that he kind of brought more productivity on both sides of the ball, as opposed to feeling like we had to worry a lot about his defense like we did have to with some of the other players on this list. So obviously, in terms of outfielders, I have to put Jarren Duran at the top, and I'm actually putting him at the overall top of the position players in terms of most valuable Red Sox player this year, most impactful, because not only could he hit super well, but also he played a great defense in the outfield. His defense increased significantly in progress this year, because in the past, last year, he struggled in the outfield more defensively. He took huge leaps in regards to his defensive game this year. And that helped him to really be a more impactful five-tool player all around, somebody who could be relied upon to make the right plays out there. And with his speed, he was able to gain a lot of ground in center field. And he's kind of played all three outfield positions this year. So that definitely helped the Red Sox too. So he's definitely at the top for the outfielders, because also he has the speed that not a lot of other players on this Red Sox team have. And yes, Ceddanne Rafaela has that too. So that's something that I thought about when considering his contribution to this team. But I just think there were too many struggles in Rafaela's game to this point where I couldn't really rank him higher. So Jarren Duran being able to steal as many bases as he does and just being able to throw off opposing pitchers makes him to me, the best outfielder that the Red Sox had this year on the major league team, somebody who was playing every day and making an impact every single day for this Red Sox team. That's something special. So I was happy to put him at the top of the outfielders. And I would go as far as to even say he's at the top of my list in the power rankings, the number one Red Sox player for the season. So while we're going through here and talking about the end of season position player power rankings, I'm going to be discussing the infield next and where exactly those guys stand in terms of their ability to contribute. It's never too early to start thinking about retirement. And that's something that my mom always pushed with me. Like, whenever you start working, make sure you start a 401k right away. Like, it's never a bad thing to start saving up money for retirement. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Again, if you have the opportunity to save money in some capacity and put yourself in a better place for retirement, you absolutely should do that. So get started today at robinhood.com/boost. So I am here giving my Red Sox position player power rankings in terms of who contributed, who didn't contribute as much, what do you guys need to work on before we go into an off season in which the Red Sox need to make lots of moves in order to put themselves back into a place of contention. So I already went through my outfield power rankings. So now we're moving over into the infield. Now, the Red Sox infield has had a lot of reshuffling this year between Trevor Story's injury that was almost season ending and him coming back recently. Vaughn Grissom originally supposed to be playing second base and then him getting injured and then spending time in AAA. So the Red Sox have had to do a lot of reshuffling within the middle infield, especially. And you have guys like Enmanuel Valdez and David Hamilton who served as kind of platoon guys. And then you're looking at the situation of Yoshida, primarily being the DH, and where does he fit into this whole thing? So when looking at the position players, and I'm going to just include Yoshida in the infield conversation for the sake of explaining where he would go on my depth chart here. Because he doesn't play in the field, and when he does play in the field, he's a defensive liability, and he wasn't crazy consistent as a DH this year, I'm putting him towards the bottom of the list in terms of players who were super impactful for this Red Sox team this year. He is somebody who would go below a lot of these other players I'm going to talk about here. One player I would put below Yoshida is Enmanuel Valdez. There are moments that he has where he comes up with a big hit, but they aren't always in the most opportune situations every time. And he is a defensive liability. He hasn't been able to get his defense really in check with where we wanted it to be at. So I definitely need to see more from Valdez. I think there's a lot of potential there, absolutely. And because of the fact that he's shown some offensive prowess, I think there's a chance the Red Sox might look into trading him because they feel like his value could be decent because of what he has shown in his time with the Red Sox. So I have to put Valdez kind of as that guy who's at the bottom in terms of the infielders, just because I feel like there hasn't been a lot of crazy productivity from him. Now, I'm not even counting Vaughn Grissom in this. I would have to put Vaughn Grissom even below him just because Grissom obviously hasn't played much, not his fault, of course, but when he has played, he hasn't been able to really connect at the plate. And he hasn't been somebody who Red Sox fans could look at and say, wow, I'm really excited about him. Like the Red Sox got a really good return in the Chris Sale trade. We can't really say that yet. And maybe it's a little bit unfair to place him in that position now of saying, well, you should have been better for us because of the injuries that he's faced. But I do have to put him at the bottom right now of the position player group because of the fact that he just hasn't been able to showcase much at all. And he hasn't been able to come through and be a big offensive asset yet. But then I'm putting Valdez after that. Then I'm going with somebody who has been an average hitter and an average defender, but his speed puts him a little higher than the other two that I mentioned, and that is David Hamilton, who has played a mix of shortstop and second base this year, ended up on the IL in the last month or so. So we haven't seen him in a while, but he was always hitting after Jarren Duran in the lineup. And if he could get himself on base, I mean, that kid had the speed to be able to throw off opposing pitchers. So if you had the combination of Jarren Duran and David Hamilton, you knew that you were getting speed on the base paths and you were getting guys who likely were going to steal. And that was always nice to have because I loved having that dual threat of Duran and Hamilton on the base paths and them having the opportunity to put themselves in scoring position a lot of times when they got on base. But if you take out the speed, what exactly did Hamilton provide that was better than a lot of other players on the team? Not much. Like, yeah, sure, he had his opportunities and his moments where he was stringing together big hits, but he was a pretty average hitter overall. And defensively, he made some miscues. So I can't really put him any higher up on the list because I just feel like there were a lot of areas of his game in which he was average. And the reason he was able to hang on to a consistent spot was because he provided that speed. And the Red Sox would utilize the speed of him, Rafaela, and Duran a lot to be able to contribute and get some runs on the board, even when the offense was struggling. And I know I was pretty harsh to Rafaela, but again, I mean, he is a rookie, and I just don't really feel like his consistency at the plate has been enough for me yet. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure it will eventually. But yeah, so I'm putting David Hamilton there about in the middle. If you incorporate Trevor Story, I would put him next. And I think that's only because his defense has just been really good. And him coming back to the Red Sox from the IL has really made that infield defense look a lot more cohesive. And that's something that's so important to this team. And he has been hitting pretty well overall since coming back. I mean, he's stringing together a hit or two in pretty much every game since coming back into the Red Sox lineup. And so that's been good because that's a better version of Story than we've been getting offensively a lot generally in his time with this team. So the fact that he's able to make that kind of contribution and be able to at the plate be a key piece has been something to me that has stood out, that I've been like, oh, wow, maybe we're getting a better version of Story. Maybe going into next year, we'll get a guy who is able to go out there and really contribute. So I'm putting Trevor Story there about in the middle. Triston Casas is a tricky one because if you just take this year, obviously he overall hasn't been anything special offensively, but you can't really hold that against him because we know what Casas can do. Like, it's a different situation from Vaughn Grisham where we really don't know what he can do fully yet because we just haven't seen enough of him. But with Casas, we know what he can do because we saw it all of last year. And I truly think the injuries have been what has held him back. And I think it'd be a lot different of a conversation we're having about him if he had been healthy this year. So it's almost unfair to even include him just because he didn't have the season that Red Sox fans were hoping he would have, or honestly that he was hoping he would have. And in his time back, I mean, he had that big 3 home run game against the Twins, but it took him a while to get his swing back on track and get back to where he needs to be. And I'm hoping now he's turning a corner and getting to the point where he could be even more of an offensive contribution. So I feel like I have to put him in the middle for the sake of just giving him the benefit of the doubt and knowing where Casas could be. But he really shouldn't even be on the list because he didn't play much at all this year. So not really a fair judgment call there. So then when you look at the rest of the position players who are currently on the team too. Like I, decided not to include Garrett Cooper, who just was absolutely abysmal with the Red Sox. Dom Smith is who I would put next above Casas because he early on in his time with the Red Sox was super tough to watch, could not connect offensively, and wasn't really making the right plays defensively either, was bobbling the ball a lot and making errors. So people were ready to just ship him out of town. But he really became a great leader for a young baseball team, a team with lots of guys who are still learning the game and still trying to find their way and figure out their identity on this Boston Red Sox team. So having Smith as one of those mentors in the locker room who was able to come in and be like, hey, I'm a veteran. I've been through the hardships. I understand what it's like to go through those things. And even knowing that he didn't have a future with this team because he was a placeholder until Casas came back, he played his heart out and he really started to turn things around. Like, in the second half of his time in Boston, he was clicking offensively, getting some big hits, and his defense at first base had improved. So I definitely wanted to include Dom Smith just because I think his presence was really good for this Boston Red Sox team. And he did a lot more than people thought in terms of his turnaround and his ability to get this team on track to where it needed to be at the time. So definitely putting Dom Smith in the higher end of infield position players in terms of my rankings, because that off the field leadership and giving 100%, even when you know that your time to not be on this team anymore is coming, you're still giving this team everything that you have. And it's so easy for players to fold in that situation and say, well, why should I give them 100% of my time? Because they're going to just let go of me. So I really liked that attitude that he portrayed. Now, when you're looking at other players who have been bounced in, the next player in the infield that I'm putting on the list is Romy Gonzalez. And this is because Romy has been excellent as a pinch hitter, especially, but just in general on offense. He has been somebody who has come in and provided a spark for the Red Sox offensively when they needed one. And whenever Cora would be coming and saying he's bringing in a pinch hitter and we saw that it was Romy, you would feel good about Romy being in the game. And that was pretty cool to me because he was somebody who I trusted, and I didn't really think it would get to the point early on in the season where I would say, hey, I really trust Romy Gonzalez in that role. But he has really blossomed into a reliable player for this Red Sox team. And he's somebody to me that I feel deserves a little bit more credit than maybe what he's been getting in terms of that ability to be so effective as a pinch hitter. So Romy Gonzalez is towards the top of my list for position players. And coming up, I'm going to be finishing up my position player list, revealing the number one infielder on my list, which I'm sure you have already figured out by now. And then I'm going to be breaking down the catching situation for Boston in 2024. This episode of Locked On Red Sox is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about, like other baseball cities in particular. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival's city during the postseason. Maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition's stadium cuisine. Luckily, on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's just right for you. With Booking.com's wide variety of choices across the U.S., you can go incognito to all your baseball rivals' cities. The last time I used Booking.com, I ended up getting a hotel at a very reasonable rate that you literally could see PNC Park from. My fiance and I were going to a Pirates game there, and we wanted to stay in a hotel that was conveniently close. So I used Booking.com to book it, and it was very reasonably priced, could walk right across to the ballpark, and it was just such a prime location. So that could be you next time you're trying to go to a baseball ballpark you've never seen before, especially this postseason. So make sure you utilize Booking.com no matter what team you are rooting for this postseason. The right stay can absolutely make you a fan of any city, no matter which city it is. If you're looking for a fun way to play daily fantasy sports, you should check out Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Want to play Prize Picks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, and MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names on the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. All you have to do is just download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Prize Picks can win you so much money, and it's a great way to play daily fantasy sports. So make sure you check that out immediately following this show. I am here giving my Red Sox end of season position player power rankings. Now, you may be surprised by some, but the reasoning behind all of this and what I'm trying to portray here is trying to paint a picture of which players are worth keeping on this Red Sox team in the future and will be part of that future that the Red Sox are coveting and really excited about. So when it comes to the infield position players, it's hard with players like Vaughn Grisham and Trevor Story because they didn't really play much this year. And Triston Casas, same thing. If those guys were playing, it would probably be a different conversation. But the Red Sox have had a lot of platoon players in there, like David Hamilton, Ceddanne Rafaela even playing in the infield. Vaughn Grisham and Manuel Valdez, Romy Gonzalez, guys who have kind of switched around. But somebody who has been consistent and has played third base all season long is Rafael Devers, my #1 infielder for this Red Sox team, just consistently reliable. And the craziest thing about Devers is even though he was fighting through a shoulder issue all season long, he still played through it and still contributed and still was hitting in the high 200s, like 285 about all season long that he was averaging. And you might say it's a little bit disappointing for Devers, but knowing the fact that he's had that injury that he's been dealing with, it really makes it not feel as bad of a season, because that can be such a struggle to hit through that kind of pain. And even with making the routine plays in the infield at third base, like that can't be easy for him to do. And the fact that he was still able to get himself out there and contribute and never complain about the workload or complain about being out there every day, I'll always admire Devers for that. And, he signed that massive contract extension with this Red Sox team. So now that he's finally getting that shoulder thing under wraps, he's hopefully primed for a huge season next year. And I can't help but feel like we're going to get the version of Devers next year that everybody was waiting to see this year, that just signed that contract extension and is the heart of this Red Sox team. I mean, I really think it's coming at us quickly. And I think the biggest key was just getting that resolved with the shoulder thing so that he could come in and be that guy that Red Sox fans have been patiently waiting for. So I have to put him at the top of the list for infielders. I mean, he's been the most consistent. He has been the guy who has been relied upon in so many different situations to come up big. The one thing I will say about Devers that he needs to improve on is situational hitting. He was not good when it came to coming in with runners in scoring position and trying to drive in runs. He was striking out a lot in those scenarios. So that's a big aspect of his game that he's going to have to get better in next season as we progress through our time here with these players. But overall, if you think about this infield, and not that it's the Red Sox fault that they didn't really have a ton of consistency in the infield this year and they had guys switching between second base and shortstop a lot, Devers was a constant, played third base nearly every day and went out there and never complained and did his job. So I'm putting Devers as #1 in terms of the infielders. Now, you might be asking again where Masataka Yoshida fits into this. Overall, in terms of the team in general, he's in the bottom half because he can't play defense and his hitting hasn't been consistent enough. But when he's on fire, he looks like one of the best hitters on the team. But I just am not comfortable enough putting him higher up on the list for now. Maybe that will change if the Red Sox don't trade him and he stays here next year. But he's definitely somebody who's in the lower half for me. Now we go to the catchers. I mean, obviously the catching tandem of Reese McGuire and Connor Wong early on was absolutely mashing. Both of them were hitting really well. And from a defensive standpoint, Connor Wong appeared to have cleaned some of his defensive struggles up. But then things kind of started to go downhill. Reese McGuire cooled down significantly when he dropped back down to reality after his really hot start. And Connor Wong's defense started to struggle, showing improving just how not great of a defensive catcher he actually is. So things started to deteriorate for the catching tandem. And then Danny Jansen came in, and the Red Sox saw him as an upgrade from Reese McGuire, but offensively, he could not do anything of value. So it was definitely really hard to rank these catchers because Danny Jansen's defense was better than Reese's, but from an offensive standpoint, Danny Jansen cannot do anything. But I think when you think of those three catchers, I have to put Reese McGuire at the bottom just because once he started to cool down offensively, there wasn't a whole lot he was able to do. Not able to effectively throw out as many base runners, not able to make those key stops behind the plate. And his offense started to feel like it was the same thing over and over again. And he wasn't able to make a lot of hard contact. So I still have to put him below Danny Jansen, and then I'm putting Danny Jansen right above him because at least Jansen came in and provided value defensively. When I look at the two of them next to each other, Jansen to me still provided more value because he provided the defense that the Red Sox needed that they didn't really get as much from Reese. So I'm putting him there. And then I'm putting Wong at number one, but that's a really light number one. He doesn't really deserve to be number one in many categories at all for this team. But because of the fact that he had this massive first half and his second half did drop down significantly, which made it hard for me to put him at number one on the list. And his defense has struggled all season long. I still have to keep him at number one because he's been the most consistent catcher this year. He's played the most games at catcher for the Red Sox. And that first half of the season was huge for him offensively and quite frankly helped keep the Red Sox in the wild card race for a very long time because he was somebody who was showing up consistently at the plate and was showing lots of plate discipline and recording big hits. So when I'm thinking about these catchers that have come through this year, he's definitely at the top. I mean, Mickey Gasper didn't play enough for me to really evaluate him at catcher and where he stands. But with the three primary catchers that this Red Sox team has this year, I have to go with Connor Wong first, then Danny Jansen, then Reese McGuire at the bottom. But something needs to be done about the catching. Once Kyle Teel is ready to come up, I feel like he'll definitely be the number one starting catcher with Connor Wong behind him as the backup. So hopefully that does happen because the Red Sox need a serious upgrade at the catching position because they can't roll out these guys and expect to be successful with that. So hopefully with the fact that Kyle Teel is waiting in the rafters in AAA and could emerge at any point soon when he's ready to come up and contribute as a catcher for this team, hopefully he's able to come up and be that guy that the Red Sox have been anxiously waiting on so that Connor Wong isn't being relied upon to be that number one catcher. So there you have it, folks, my end of season position player power rankings. Tune in on Monday when I do my pitcher power rankings so you'll know who I felt the best pitcher on the team was this year all the way down to the worst pitcher. So that will be Monday's episode. So make sure you tune in for that. Make sure after this show, you tune into Locked On MLB. Host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, will be there to give you the latest in all things going on around the league. So if you are interested in getting caught up in all things going on in baseball, you can find his show wherever you get podcasts right after this. As always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.